did come out of the gate swinging. We have, I think, 80 lawyers and maybe a new office, depending on how this morning's call without me goes. We have a great core of C-suite people. They're all non-lawyers. Most of them have 20 plus years of experience. And so they've done a ton of the heavy lifting on that side, which I think has been a real blessing for us, but also I think is sort of setting our firm up for success. I think about 75% of my work, maybe more, my new work comes from LinkedIn or social media. I use other social media as sort of a dumping ground. I really focus on LinkedIn, and I'm approaching 30,000 connections, which after the 30,000 connection point, you can't make connections, right? You can only get followers. So that's sort of a big milestone.
It is.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Today's guest, man, I owe a lot to this guy, and we're going to get into that a little later. But Jeff Cunningham is a lawyer I met online on LinkedIn, I don't know, maybe 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now. And he recently went out and founded a firm. And he went big out of the gate too. I mean, 75, maybe 100 lawyers. So we're gonna get into all of that. So Jeff also, his practice area is similar to mine. We overlap in some areas here, so we've got that in common too. So Jeff, I guess the name of the firm is Cohen, Vaughn.
That's right. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about where you are, what you do, and tell us a little about your firm. We're going to dive into the firm, so give us a high level, and we'll go deep.
Sure. So Jeff Cunningham, I am in Stamford, Connecticut, one of our many offices. We did come out of the gate swinging. We have, I think, 80 lawyers and maybe a new office, depending on how this morning's call without me goes. And we might have a new office launching in a new state. So we're in 7 states. It's a partnership of law firms. There's actually 3 firms that came together. Our side is brand new, and then we partnered up with another firm that acquired another firm. So it's been an interesting collaboration. We do insurance defense and commercial litigation, really on the defense side. And 7 states, so it's been a lot of work. I'm the general counsel of the firm, so there's been a lot of integration. It's been really interesting to do. And, really exciting. And it's a weird but exciting role as the owner and founder of a firm now. Whole different world. So
it's different. So are you guys solely litigation of all types? Do you do anything other than litigation?
For now, it's solely litigation. I mean, with workers' comp as well, which is, near litigation, I guess.
Litigation light. Litigation light.
Yeah. Administrative litigation. Yeah. There's definitely interest in more transactional work as well. And I'd love to see some IP guys come in and some more traditional corporate stuff come in as well. And then we also do have a bit of insurance coverage practice that sort of, runs along with the insurance defense side.
So, like you said, you guys went big out of the gate, 75 lawyers at least starting. You had to bring together 2 or 3 sort of firms. What's it been like for you? I mean, you're used to practicing law, running client matters. Have you had time to do any of that?
Yep. I've still had time to run my practice. And I mean, I mostly defend lawyers, deal with the grievance stuff, and do the general counsel work like you do. I have a couple of other matters as well that have sort of, stuck with me for most of my career at this point. They just kind of, never ending, but hopefully we wrap them up soon. I've had some time to do that work. Most of my time's been devoted to streamlining our processes. We had 3 groups basically, and everybody was doing things a little different. So, sort of picking out the best end result of pretty much everything we're doing has been my full-time job this 2 months. We have a great core of C-suite people, non-lawyers, chief operations officer, chief admin officer, chief marketing, chief human rights, chief client relationship, and chief financial officers. They're all non-lawyers. They all have most of them have 20 plus years of experience. And so they've done a ton of the heavy lifting on that side, which I think has been a real blessing for us, but also I think is sort of setting our firm up for success because it allows, most of the lawyers to really focus on just practicing law, not trying to do those other things that we're just not as good at.
So that raises a question for me. This is something that I've taught others about, and it is just something that a lot of people who've never gone through it probably don't think about. And that is, you guys brought together you had at least one existing firm, and you're bringing a lot of people together, with bringing clients from all these places, probably coming from different technology platforms, and just the logistical implementation of bringing that all together. It's one thing to say, yeah, we're partners, we'll sign a partnership agreement. It's another to like actually bring in the data and do all that. So I guess the first thing is I assume you had a team that helped do that, but how do you choose, for example, what technology platform practice management to use? Because I'm sure you were using at least 2 or 3 different ones. How do you say, all right, we're going to do this one?
Yeah. So we have a technology committee. I'm a big fan of committees and trying to, get buy-in from partners, lawyers, non-lawyers, everybody and anybody I can sort of pull into the committee. I do. So our tech committee, we've spent probably 3 to 5 hours a week demoing different platforms. We didn't want to be tied into kind of what we all knew and used, just because we didn't want inertia to sort of keep us. Most of us were familiar with certain platforms, and that was good. There's definitely an advantage to that, but we really wanted to shop around. So we've been shopping, pretty much everything. We're sort of using our existing software until we find a replacement. And then there's some new stuff that we are exploring. There's this company Nexel, which is a client management tool. We shopped a bunch of them, and we have a platform right now that does a decent job of it, but Nexel sort of taking it, I guess they named themselves Nexel because of that. They're sort of taking it to the next level. And I just got their name. I never really thought about that before. But that's been a really exciting tool. That's going to take probably half a year for our people to finish the training on, because it's really different. I mean, it's really AI driven, and I think it's going to be really, really powerful. But, only a few of our people are going to use that. The rest of us are going to use our traditional CRM that we're a little more comfortable with. I don't even want to say it's limited, but it's not unlimited like Nexel seems to be. But even things, mundane things like some of us used Zoom, some of us used Teams, it was sort of and their pricing wasn't a factor. The actual software use isn't a factor. They basically do the same thing. It was more of like a Pepsi Coke. I know you're down in Atlanta, so I don't want to get into that battle. But it really is more just like, what do you use generally? What are you comfortable with? And as a litigation firm, what do your courts use? I'm in New York and Connecticut. They both use Teams, so Teams makes sense for me. And Teams won the fight. So although we still use Zoom a little bit.
It's interesting. So let's just talk about Teams and Zoom. So I use both, and some people prefer one or the other. But a really smart lawyer I know said he talked to a lot of smart lawyers he knew, and sort of the conclusion was, going forward, to the extent you can stay within the Microsoft universe, they have lots of different services, and Teams competes with Zoom. It may not be as good right now, but long term, the more you can stay within that universe, it talks to each other, and then as AI sort of gets layered on top of it, it can pull all from the same universe more easily than if you've got these different platforms that are bolted together, so to speak. So let me ask.
And the security too. I mean, the Microsoft security platform, is just more robust than Zoom's. That's my understanding. So, I think as it grows too, you're going to be better off in that world from a security standpoint too.
That makes sense. I know that's big for you. So I want to dig in a few more of these. So I'm sort of looking for a practice management solution, maybe switching here. Do you have a top 2 or 3 that you like? I'm curious.
So you use Clio, if I remember correctly, right?
For now.
Okay.
And it's manageable, but there's a lot of limitations.
Yeah. So I think Clio is probably what I recommend to people the most. I've only demoed it. I've never actually used it in the trenches. So I like to be clear about that. I mean, right now we're using ProLaw, which is really, you need a lot of users, I think, to make it make sense. It does a lot. I've never found one I love. I'll say that, right? There's no perfect system. I think ProLaw is really great for us in that the billing component is pretty integrated and streamlined, and you can get at everything from a lot of different ways, but our people are billing every 6 minutes. So anything we can do to get their time in contemporaneously and not waste a lot of time billing, that sort of wins out over other functionality, which I don't know that you would necessarily need, or a lot of firms would actually, honestly, I don't even need it. Most of my practice is now flat fee and membership based, less hourly billing. But so that's a big component for us. I've heard really good things about Smokeball, which I've also demoed, but never actually used for real. But I do know with Clio as well and Smokeball, I think as you scale, they sort of get you in at kind of a realistic price. And then as you scale, it sort of gets expensive, but you're sort of tied into, it's sort of like if you're committing to teams, right? If you're committing to Clio, and they start raising the price as you grow, then it's like, how do you, it's expensive to get out of Clio. So
that is the number one thing. So I've been looking to switch, but you don't want to just switch willy-nilly because it's expensive. And I mean more of a time, data transfer, training. So if you switch and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't really like that one, I'm switch again. That's just too much.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough reality because, and if you demo something, right, it's different because like it works perfect. They have it set up so that it, so that it looks great, right? It's like test driving a car, like you're in it for a minute and everything's cool. And then, you buy it and you get home and you're like, wait a minute, there's no cup holder, right? Or whatever, the little things you don't notice. So it's tough. I mean, and I think the best thing you can do is ask around, but I find if you ask lawyers about their practice management solutions, any technology solutions, you're just going to get negative feedback. I mean, nobody's like, I love my practice management software, nobody, because there's always
something friction. Wrong with one.
Yeah.
All right. I want to talk one more sort of transition question, then we'll move into some other stuff. And this is a component to probably your practice. I know mine. It's the logistics of sort of the notice to the firm, notice to the clients, and the file transfer. Again, it was a lot going on. How long did that take? Take me through, give me your take on it.
Yeah. So, my prior firm, McAngus, Goodall, and Curry, should teach a course in how to properly transition lawyers out of their firm. They did an amazing job. And, this is now my sixth law firm I've been at, and they did it right. And it's still ongoing, right? I still have a couple clients that I'm trying to get them to respond. And, they would write back like, I'm going with you, Jeff. And it's like, thank you. But could you please direct my old firm to transfer the file? What are we supposed to do with this trust money? Can you answer any of the questions I asked you? And yeah, it's a lot. And as you know, and as you and I have discussed, when you have to provide notice to the firm, when you then can go to the clients, we at MGC, my prior firm, they're very big on the joint letter approach, which was fantastic. And we were able to do. My partners came from 4 different firms, right? And so some of them did almost as good a job. Some of them did a very bad job, those firms. And, some of them tried to suggest that you couldn't compete with them, which of course, under the ethics rules, we can't agree to that. Some of them were a little, I don't want to say shady, but near shady about, client files and trying to hold client files hostage, which of course we can't do either. So we are not done transitioning files. And I do think that's one of it's the third item on my to-do list is to create a protocol so that when people leave us, we haven't lost anybody yet, but when people leave us, we have as smooth a transition as possible. And the reality is, I mean, and again, I think this shows by how much I'm going to say McAngus, Goodall, and Curry today. There's no, lawyers leave. There's no reason to take a normal end of a relationship and make it bad. Right? I have nothing but goodwill towards that firm. I'll send them work. I left work there with clients that came with me, but a couple of specific cases were best handled by them. Cases where I have lawyers in Pennsylvania. I could have took that work, but it's in the right hands. So we've left it there. And it's just, they did it right. And they're creating an alumni network that actually wants to help their firm when so many of my other prior firms go the opposite direction and try to cut your legs out from under you and, So yeah, the transition is still ongoing. It's been interesting to see it from so many different law firms, but I think there is a right way to do it, and most law firms miss the mark.
Yeah, for those out there that are maybe considering leaving their firm to go start a firm, it's just something that you got to think through. And then also on the flip side, if someone leaves, you got to, there's a right way and a wrong way, and there's a lot of shades in between, I guess, that we all see. So. Well, cool. All right, man. Well, I want to go back. I want to go back before law school. Another thing, I know you're big. You're a Citadel grad. I know that's a big thing for you. So I want to dive into that just a little bit. So why did you decide to go there? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I just was going to go in the military. That was kind of my plan. I got accepted to the Naval Academy. Both my grandfathers were in the Navy. I was born in Albany, New York, about 4 hours from the ocean, so I don't exactly know why I thought that was a good idea. I didn't go in the Navy, but my medical got deferred a year, So I got into the Naval Academy. It was a lot of hoops to jump through, but I had to wait a year because my medical was late. And then I got a scholarship to the Citadel. So my father said, go to the Citadel for a year. You'll get in shape. You'll learn the stuff. And then you go to the Naval Academy. So I did that. And I got kind of brainwashed. You get the ring, right? I switched to Army shortly after the first semester in the Navy. I switched to the Army ROTC program and decided I wanted to, be a Citadel graduate and not go to the Naval Academy, for better or worse. And then, it was a terrible, terrible experience. Just day to day, it was absolutely awful. And you sort of trick yourself into believing that next week, next year, it'll be better. And it only gets worse and worse and worse. It was 4 years of just awful. But now that it's done and behind me, yeah, it's a huge part of my life. I'm so grateful that I did it and learned so much from it. Learned a ton about myself. I have amazing friends and an incredible network. But yeah, it's just an awful college experience. I mean, there's something wrong with people who are like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So
that's funny. My nephew is in the Air Force Academy, and it's, I don't talk to him a bunch about it, but similar sort of stories. That first year, It's like, is he going to quit? Any moment, is he going to quit? Is he going to quit? And then the second year, is he going to quit? Is he going to quit? Well, he's going to be graduating soon.
Yeah. It's interesting how it gets worse and worse in different ways, and we lose about 30 to 40% of the people by the time, about 30% in the first year. But by the time you graduate, you're usually down to 40, maybe 50% of the class. Also it's a college. So not everybody's cut out to be in college. And then when I was there, the Afghanistan and Iraq wars had just kicked off. So we had guys, dropping out to go enlist and stuff. It was, you lose a good chunk of people, but the people who finish with you, they really are lifelong friends, and it's really an amazing network.
Yeah, you share this awful experience, so to speak, and then it binds you, right? So I'm sure you're very close with your class. What about sort of just the alumni network? Is that pretty robust?
Yeah, it is, and it's really wild. I could talk to a guy who graduated in the 60s or a guy who graduated in 2024 or a girl in 2024. There was no girls in the 60s, but a guy or a girl recently. And, everything has changed, but nothing has changed. It's really crazy to the similarities between now and then and my time. And I always say, you can at least trust a Citadel grad. You can take them at face value. There's enough that wears people down there and sort of separates, I don't know, the wheat from the chaff, I think is the expression or something. That if somebody graduated, they're probably a decent person. They're probably trustworthy. It's not a perfect system, but it's pretty close. And so you have kind of an instant bond. And I run our Citadel Alumni Legal Network. It's a Facebook group primarily. And we just connect grads to lawyers. And we try to connect grads to Citadel lawyers, but that's not always possible. It's a small school, and it's very concentrated in South Carolina and the South. And it really is just a great network and a great program. And, you're just dealing with a caliber of people that you can sort of trust sight unseen, And again, it's not perfect. We have a bad apple here and there, but compared to the average person off the street, you're dealing with someone who's probably a little better. And if nothing else, they can suffer and endure a bad situation and get through the other side. So that's something.
So you made it through. Did you have to serve? Was there any sort of commitment?
No. So luckily for me, I got an academic scholarship to go there. So you have to do ROTC. So I did 4 years of ROTC, 3.5 of Army ROTC. And I was planning to go into the Army and be a lawyer. That was sort of my big plan. And I ended up getting a Fulbright scholarship, which was 99%. My professor, Dr. Gerganis, he sort of duped me into being a dual major. I was a history major, and I speak Yiddish. I'm Jewish, obviously. And Yiddish and German are extremely close together. I didn't know this when I was a kid, but I signed up for Spanish in high school. It was full, so they put me in German, and I was like, I kind of speak this language already, So I sort of faked my way through German in high school. And I didn't actually have to take any language classes at the Citadel because my New York high school credit counted as college credit down there. And so he called me into his office. I didn't sign up for anything. And he called me in his office, and I think he hypnotized me. I left as a double major. I wasn't even signed up for a class, and I left as a double major. And I was like, what happened? How did he do that? And then he essentially just, he did most of the legwork to get me the scholarship. So I had a year-long scholarship to Germany. I went to Israel after that. I was still planning to come back to the Army, but I had a 6-month scholarship in Israel. And then I met my wife, who decided I should just be a lawyer and not a lawyer in the Army. And so she sort of hypnotized me too. I went back, I went to Fordham and gave up on the Army, for better or worse. All my guys are retiring this year from the Army. So, they've hit the 20 years. So I'm a little jealous.
They get that pension, man. What do you got? Okay, so why law school? Do you have lawyers in the family? You said you knew you wanted to do it. What about the law? What was it?
I actually, my uncle was a St. John's Law School grad, but he was a history teacher. He never practiced law, really. And then I have a cousin who's a tax attorney, but he's my age. I had a cousin who was a solo practitioner up in Albany, but I never really, my immediate family, I was the first college graduate, didn't really know lawyers. I didn't even know my uncle was a lawyer, the guy, he was a teacher. So I didn't know it until I went to law school. He did not like law school or practicing law, obviously. That's why. And, I was one of those kids who everybody said you should be a lawyer because I was, kind of a smart aleck, I guess. And, looking back, it wasn't like people thinking I was so smart. It was I think I was probably an annoying little kid and they were like, oh yeah, you should be a lawyer.
Lawyers are so annoying, man.
Yeah. I don't, looking back, it wasn't a compliment about how smart I was, right? I think law school, it was a lot my wife, but I was planning to be a lawyer in the Army. I kind of thought I would go in the Army first. The wars were still on. It was still sort of, I was still more brainwashed from the Citadel. And so I was dabbling in being an artillery officer because I like blowing things up and fires and stuff. So it sort of seemed cool. Yeah, my wife sort of steered me to just, go to law school. And then I only applied to New York City Law School. She was finishing her graduate school there. And yeah, I guess I'm not good at anything else. And that's ultimately why I think I'm a pretty good lawyer. But yeah, nothing else I could come up with to do with my time that would be as profitable or as fulfilling. So, it sort of made sense.
Well, I'll tell you something else you're really good at, and that's LinkedIn. So
yes,
I do want to talk about that. So that's how we met. This probably, again, I don't know exactly. It might be 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think about 3 years ago.
Something like that. And I remember you reached, I've been on LinkedIn forever, but I never did anything on there really. And then you reached out and said, hey, let's hop on a Zoom call, out of the blue. And I said, sure. And you're like, we sort of do the same thing. And we started talking and I started looking at your LinkedIn profile and I was like, man, this guy is posting all the time, all sorts of stuff. And I remember asking you is this worth doing? Should I try it? And you encouraged me to do it. So I'm not as active now as I have been in the past. It's just, you go through these waves. I'm curious if you have too,
Yep.
You get really excited about it, then sort of burned out, and I'm still doing a little. I'll just say that. So,
yep.
So let me ask, how and why did you get started with LinkedIn?
So right before I answer that, I will say you should go look at your analytics, and while you step back from it, I think it's always interesting to look. If I have a Jewish holiday where I'm offline for 4 days, once in a while that happens. I hop back on and I see that it was working in the background while I wasn't using it. I got 20,000 impressions or something. So check out your analytics. It could fire you back up to get more into it. In 2011, I was at Wilson-Elster, and they brought all the New York City associates into the big conference room, and they had some speaker come and talk about LinkedIn, and they made us sign up for LinkedIn right there, right? They passed around tablets. Everybody had to sign in, create their LinkedIn profile. And so I did because I was told to do it. And then they never made us do anything with it after that. It was just you had to do it. And so I sort of used it kind of passively until COVID hit. And when COVID hit, my wife was just like, you have to stop talking about this stuff or we're going to need to get divorced because I can't deal with the rules of professional. I don't care. She's a school psychologist. She did not want to hear about my take on 1.6. It wasn't working for her. And I was like, all right, that's fair. So, I started posting on LinkedIn. I had always kind of shared articles once in a blue moon. At Goldberg Scholar, we had a program where it would sort of help you share articles. It would, you punched in what you liked and it would kind of feed you articles and then you could share right from that platform. It was all right. But it was really COVID and not having, and I was in our living room working. I didn't have any social outlet at all. It sort of turned into that. And I watched Justin Welch, had this webinar, and a guy, Frank Ramos, who's actually at Goldberg Segala now. He wasn't then, but he gave a webinar about, LinkedIn for lawyers. And I watched that. Again, it was just sort of, I had nothing else going on because of COVID. And those two webinars kind of got me fired up. I bought Justin's course. It was $80 or something. It was fantastic. And then from there, I just kind of came up with a plan and committed to posting every day. I think I'm a very successful amateur. I don't have any secrets. I think the biggest thing you can do on LinkedIn or any social media is just post and produce content. And, the inertia there's so many lawyers use LinkedIn, but don't do anything with it. They're just consumers. So you can really stand out by just posting. And I post mostly about the model rules, and I usually do like in order by number. One day I talk about 1.1, the next day I talk about 1.2. And as you know, I've created a bunch of different LinkedIn groups because I was posting. It turned out I was posting too much. I was posting 5 times a day. So I've created groups to sort of segregate it out and slow it down a little bit. But yeah, it's been great. And I think about 75% of my work, maybe more, my new work comes from LinkedIn or social media. I mean, I use other social media as sort of a dumping ground. I really focus on LinkedIn, and I'm approaching 30,000 connections, which after the 30,000 connection point, you can't make connections, right? You can only get followers. So that's sort of a big milestone.
It is,
so
man.
I'm at about 28,000, I think, right now. So
well, you'll get there this year. It's funny you mentioned, there's a lot of people that I've talked to that got active on there during COVID. So sort of like they're stuck in their house. And, there's some folks that sort of view that as the glory days before people like I got involved. But the other guy you mentioned, Frank Ramos, he's like one of the OGs of
75,000, I think.
Lawyer LinkedIn
followers.
Folks, right?
Yeah.
And he's still doing the same style. It's just text posts, no photos, maybe every now and then he does, but no videos, just consistent. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. He posts great stuff. And I've met Frank virtually a few times, and he really embraces kind of what I think works best on LinkedIn is just sort of that abundance mentality, giving. He hosted for like a year, once a week. It was just this open AI forum. Anybody who wanted to talk legal AI could hop on this webinar with him or this, Zoom call or whatever it was. And it was an hour, and he spent an hour every week just talking, with anybody who wanted to show up. And it was really great conversation. I wish he'd keep doing it. I'm guessing life got in the way, but yeah, he's a great example of like just consistency. And, every day, he's going to post something. It'll be, probably interesting enough to check out. And he does a great job with it.
So the other thing about your content, it's you experiment, which I like. You've done all sorts of different posts. You do some videos, some carousels, some this, some of that. You've done lots of different things, which is good. And, a lot of lawyers, I would not say, how do I say this? I do think there is a wrong way to use it.
Yes.
There are lots of right ways, and there's definitely some wrong ways. And one that most lawyers use it. Look at me. I'm a super lawyer.
Right.
Look at me. I won this award.
Right. I'm a super lawyer.
Great. Put that on your company profile maybe, but
yeah,
it's just, it's sort of a waste. It's really a waste, sure you can do it every now and then, but the way this is harsh, but nobody cares.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
And the algorithm doesn't care either. So not very many people are going to see it.
Yeah. One of the best posts I've ever made, and it got like 80,000 impressions, and it was just an off-the-cuff text post. I thought it was funny. I had transitioned from one firm to the other 3 years ago, and I didn't get super lawyers. I had gotten super lawyers since like 2015. Never did anything, never bought anything, but always got it. I got it again this year. And that's one of those things that I think, lawyers know is kind of, it is what it is, right? But other people, I guess, are sort of impressed or whatever. Clients do seem to care, at least in certain practices. But I didn't get it that year. And so I posted everybody says like, I'm humbled and honored, to announce that I got super lawyers. And I wrote like, I'm ashamed and humiliated.
I remember that post. That was hilarious.
I didn't get, and it took off because it resonated with people that like, we post these kind of bogus self-promoting awards, and every time I post, it's self-promoting, right? Because I am saying, look at me, look at my thoughts about Rule 3.1. But if you do it in a more authentic way, I think it just works better.
I call it, I didn't coin this phrase, but, when people ask, it's edutainment, right?
Yeah.
You want to educate in an entertaining or at least interesting way, or else no one's going to read it. You could have the best idea, thought, insight in the world, but if it's not presented in a good way, no one's going to see it. No one's going to see it. So, lots of techniques and things you can do to frame it and all those things. But,
my 0.1 videos, I think, are a great example. So I take a New York State Bar Association ethics opinion. I've been a little behind the curve on it. I got to get back into it.
I hadn't seen one of those in a while, man. What's going on?
Yeah, it's been a while. The problem is I don't have a suit.
You're busy starting a firm or something.
Yeah, I don't have a suit and tie here in the office. That's the problem. I got to get a suit and tie and just leave it here because I like to have the tie on my videos. Or I could try to get over that, but I don't know. There's some Citadel brainwashing still. But my idea was that in a 0.1, you can think about ethics and risk management in 6 minutes or less. So I had these 6-minute videos, and nobody was watching them. They bombed. And I think it was Vivica Hess, who I work with. She's sort of a LinkedIn coach. She leads a group that we all get together and talk LinkedIn. I think she said, well, try a shorter video. And I was like, I'm cramming this ethics opinion into 6 minutes, but all right. So I kept it under a minute. I did a week's worth, and it got, instead of 50 views, it got 1,000 views. And they've done, and since then I've kept them under a minute. It's done so much better because nobody wants to watch me talk about an ethics opinion for 6 minutes, right? They don't really want to watch me for 45 seconds, but people will invest the 45 seconds more, or at least see what is Cunningham talking about, more than if it is a 6 minute commitment, which is, maybe an indictment of our attention spans. I don't know. 6 minutes is not a whole lot, but I guess I do it too. I don't want to spend, even if it's an interesting topic,
well,
I'm not scrolling for that.
The other thing that, a lot of lawyers, and I want to ask some of you, give some advice here in a second, but, a lot of lawyers are, perfectionists. They're nervous about making a mistake. I mean, that's part of the profession. You got people always trying to point out the mistakes you make or argue against you. So you're very careful, and they're very careful and nervous about posting anything. And at the end of the day, I don't think I've ever watched more than 10 seconds of any of your videos ever. And you, as the person putting it out there, probably don't really care. All you care about is I see your face, and then I know you're talking about ethics. So forever and ever, I'm going to think about you and ethics. And that's really what I think lawyers should be thinking about as they post, as they do anything. It's really, most people don't have time to really dig into whatever you're saying anyway. But you want to associate yourself with whatever it is you want to be associated with.
Yeah, and the videos are a great example too, because you're a Georgia lawyer. Why would you waste a minute of your time listening to a New York State ethics opinion every day? It wouldn't be helpful for you. And so, I don't think my mother watches my videos in full. Nobody, and I don't care. They see me, they know I'm talking about it. I do a LinkedIn Live every month, and it's I think a perfect example. The invitation, you can send 1,000 a week. I start inviting 6 weeks out. So I invite probably 6,000 people to the LinkedIn Live. They get the invitation. They say yes or no. About 100 to 200 people sign up and say yes. Not a great return on 6,000 invites, but whatever. All the people getting the invites see me and know I'm talking about law firm general counsel. The people who click yes, right? They get a reminder. They know that I'm talking about this. They see the picture and stuff. And then, 10 to 20 people actually log in and watch the half-hour show. After that, LinkedIn keeps it around for a week, and I pick up maybe another 20, maybe. If I get 50 people actually look at it, that's a lot. I mean, it's probably closer to 10 to 20. But it's thousands of people that, have seen the posts, seen the reminders, seen that I'm out there talking about it. If somebody's really interested in the topic that month, then maybe they watch it and they get more out of it and they reach out. But if nothing else, it's just really to keep me top of mind. And, I think that's a huge part. The other aspect of the perfectionist aspect, lawyers, I mean, we're the worst in a lot of ways. But, if I use the wrong there in a post, I can put money on the table that somebody's going to correct it.
Every time.
They won't comment about the substance of what I'm talking about, but they'll just have to note that I said the wrong there. And in a way, that's good. Because then the algorithm's oh, somebody's commenting, and then I respond and I say, oh, yeah, thanks so much. That's helpful. And, it's a weird reality that some people just can't help themselves. And, they're otherwise fine people, I'm sure. But that actually helps, the commenting get on, along. And if you have a typo, that's a great way to indicate this isn't AI, right? AI doesn't make typos. Jeff makes typos, So you have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. It is very contrary to how lawyers think and behave, I think, on the whole. But, I think it's really worth it. And I think it really does pay dividends. And you can stand out. I talk about the model rules of professional conduct, right? It's hard to come up with a more, the tax code may be more boring. I don't know. It's hard to come up with a more boring subject matter. And you can really stand out easily because most lawyers aren't doing it. Most lawyers are just consuming on social media. So
yeah, that's right. It's funny you mentioned the commenting. I think maybe I've only blocked. I mean, LinkedIn is fairly tame compared to Twitter or other stuff. But, it's every now and then you get sort of a troll. I think I've only blocked maybe one or two people ever. Yeah. It's just getting out of hand. But sometimes I like the troll. I like somebody come in and then I'll sort of poke them in the comments to try to get them to respond. And then I can't, again, it's driving the algorithm comment,
Right.
make fun of me. I don't care. Come on.
Right. It is funny how, I think they don't recognize that they're actually helping you by,
Yeah.
by posting. And what's really weird, you mentioned Twitter, which, there's a crazier audience out there. I think I've mentioned it before. I'm blanking on the name of it now. It's an anonymous app. Oh, Fishbowl. And Fishbowl, you can post your name, you can post your business affiliation, or you can just post as like partner, associate. And it is shockingly supportive, right? It's a lot like Reddit. Same idea. I don't really use Reddit. Just, I don't know. I don't know why. But it's pretty supportive for an anonymous. I mean, you get people occasionally because it's anonymous that, they're nasty or whatever. But like on the whole, it's really less aggressive, I think, than like Twitter, where people, are not anonymous and are totally comfortable, being jerks. So.
Yeah, Twitter, I lurk. I don't really post, but I lurk.
Yeah.
So for people out there, I consider you sort of a LinkedIn pro. Maybe you don't call yourself that, but you've been doing it a long time and you do a lot of different things. You've experimented a lot. What are maybe a couple pieces of advice that you would give to lawyers out there that are considering it? Something I hear a lot is, well, there's the mental hurdle they got to get over just to do it. But then they're like, I got nothing to say. So
yeah,
what advice would you give to people out there that are maybe thinking about it?
So I think what I always recommend to people who want to kind of get started is if you read something and it's not objectionable, like it, right? Just drop a like. I use it. I use the like button as like, okay, I read that, so I like it. So I like a ton. Every time you like it, your name could be on the person's post. So you're sort of, it'll say underneath one person's name who liked it. It could be your name. So Jonathan, I like everything you post. I read everything you post. I have your bell rung, so I get a notice every time you post something. And then your entire audience sees that, once in a while, not every time, but once in a while, they see that I like the post. My name's there. The other thing is to comment, and don't just comment with like great post. Try once a day to have a substantive comment that sort of builds and supports, takes a different angle. You can be contrarian in a professional and interesting way. I think commenting is just as important as posting, and I think it's underutilized because it actually takes more time, I think, than posting. And then I have nothing to say. I would urge any lawyer to just figure the most boring part about their job. And for me, it was the rules of professional conduct. If they're in number order, I think it's even easier because you could do one a day or one a week or one a month and just try to post something about, rule 1.1 competence. It can be funny. It can be boring. You can cut and paste the rule. It doesn't have to be much, but if you get in that rhythm of posting once a week, one, you're going to see automatically, if you're a new poster, the algorithm is going to recognize that you're a new poster and it's going to throw your stuff out there to test the waters and you're going to get a bump early on. But then two, the more you do it, you kind of get over that initial like awkwardness. I was very awkward about the videos. I did not like posting videos of myself. And after I did it a little bit, I didn't care anymore. And, there is like this initial sort of skepticism about it. So I think just doing it, the Nike slogan, right? Just do it. Figure out what you can do once a week, once a day, once a month even, and just do it. It doesn't have to be profound. Like we talked about earlier, most people aren't going to really pay attention to it. I think it's sort of human nature to want to put out something interesting and that's polished. But some of my most interesting and polished stuff, nobody cares about. Some off-the-cuff stuff like, oh, I'm humiliated, I didn't get super lawyers. It connects with people. So I think just throw stuff out there. You can also reuse stuff. I'm sure you've seen the post. My most successful post, and it's really the top 4 most successful. I just had 300,000 impressions on this post. It's by far my most successful post. I interviewed 6 disbarred lawyers. It used to be 5 disbarred lawyers. I interviewed 1 more. I use that every 6 months.
Yeah.
I change it up, but the message is all the same. There's always a wellness factor. Right? There's always something going on with the disbarred lawyer. It's never a lawyer who's got everything working well. There's always some mental health or substance abuse factor. So I share that about every 6 months. I think it's a really important message, and it consistently does well. I don't know why it does so well. I've talked about interviewing disbarred lawyers in other ways, other formats, but that one I rework it every 6 months, and it consistently performs like on the top end of my posts. So when you find something that works for whether it's the algorithm or the audience, I don't know, both, you can keep using that. So you can keep kind of reusing your stuff. I don't remember what I talked about last week. So nobody remembers what I talked about last week. It's just something you have to get comfortable with, and sort of just doing it helps.
Yeah. So I definitely recycle posts. Someone said you got to learn to say the same thing 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say is, to add to you, it's, people out, I guess the first thing is probably no one's really seeing it. So don't worry about, embarrassing yourself, because there's not going to be many people who actually see it, probably, at least at first. And the other thing I'll say for lawyers particularly that say, I don't have anything to say, or I'm an ERISA lawyer and nobody wants to hear about that. Well, I tell you what, every lawyer has experiences that they can talk about that would be interesting. So first day of a new job, your first firm, your first trial, your first deposition, your first this. I mean, that, or your weirdest that, or your weirdest, whatever. And just tell the story. And people I've got some of those I cannot post on LinkedIn. It just would not be appropriate, but they're funny as hell, and I'll tell you offline. But it's like, that's just a good way to get started, because everybody's got that. You got your own point of view, your own story, and people will like that stuff. So, all right. And if people aren't following you, go follow Jeff Cunningham on LinkedIn. It's funny, Jeff, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I used to work, there's a lawyer here in Atlanta that I worked with forever. His name's Jeff Cunningham. So there is another one.
He's a general counsel to companies.
Yeah, he's a corporate lawyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jeff Cunningham, do you list Connecticut or New York as your location?
I think it says greater New York area, maybe something like that. Yeah.
All right, go find Jeff. He also does the model rule memes that are pretty good. So keep doing this.
I am the only source of model rules-based memes, and, it's a passion project. But every day we put out, a meme based on the model rules. We just restarted, actually. So that's also available on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. So
very impressive, man. That takes a lot of work to figure those out.
I was at a Valentine's Day, Suffolk County Bar Association has a Valentine's Day CLE program. I was surprised. It was very well attended. I don't know, not a very romantic county, I guess. And so somebody mentioned, I didn't even mention it, but I was talking about ethics and elder law, and somebody mentioned my model rule meme a day, and the consensus was it was so cool. And I was like, no one has ever called those cool. They are the opposite of what is cool. But thank you. I appreciate that.
You should hear what my wife says about that.
Yeah. She does not think they're cool at all. So.
Well, cool. All right. Real quick. Thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. Well, so I want to move on to something else that's really cool that you're doing, and that I'm really interested in personally, and I think other lawyers could learn a lot too. And that is, you have sort of a subscription service offering, maybe more than one. So I want to sort of dive into that. So first, describe, if it's more than one, describe all of them. Just tell me sort of how what you offer.
So we have two. One is up and running. We've been doing it for, I guess this will be our third year. Yeah, third year. In February. It started in February. So it's the On-Call General Counsel membership, and it's for $1,000 a month. Law firms, we target law firms of 10 lawyers or less, but we have a couple that are bigger. Law firms get unlimited attorney-client privilege communications, call, text, email. It's all included in the monthly fee. There's a CLE every month that we give that's ethics, risk management based, so it counts as ethics credit every month. It's through Lawline. And we meet with the firm leadership, however the firm defines leadership, once a month for a half hour. That's set. And then they can just reach out as needed when issues come up. And there's flat fee offerings every month. Like this month is a conflicts protocol, so that we're able, sort of package it and make it affordable. And then if hourly work is needed, there's a 15% discount. But you've also got us kind of essentially retained once you join the membership. And the membership, I had created it as an annual membership, but it's really start and stop. I mean, some smaller shops take the summer off, but you can start and stop at any time. We prorate and return the month's money if you cut the membership halfway. I haven't really lost too many, although a few do take the pause. If you're going to be on vacation for August, there's really no point in paying, and if something comes up, you can just pay us for the rest of August, and we're happy to have you back on the team. The other offering is, it's in the works, it's not live yet, but the Conflict Sentinel program. And the idea is for $50 per lawyer per month, we run an outsourced conflicts department. So we have your database, we put it in our conflicts software. We have our conflicts analysts run names as you get new clients. We have conflicts counsel, currently just me, but soon we'll have more than just me. Review any hits. We provide reports if any report or opinions needed about the conflict and why we think it is or is not a conflict. And then waivers, a template waiver. If it is a waivable conflict, we'll provide the waiver. And then we package that and ship it back. The idea is going to be within 24 hours, maybe sooner. We're going to sort of figure out the response time. For the law firm's lawyer, we still expect the client law firm is going to have a lawyer put eyes on it, read our recommendation, review our waiver, and go from there. But the idea is, I think conflicts checks are a real weakness for small firms, large firms, every firm. I mean, no matter how good your conflicts department is, it could be better. And so I think this is a great way for smaller firms to kind of tap into our software and our staff. A small firm doesn't need to hire a conflicts analyst, right? So they end up making a receptionist, an assistant, somebody kind of do the legwork and running the conflicts checks. And then most smaller firms, the lawyer who's clearing the conflicts and saying, oh, no conflict, no problem, is usually the lawyer who has a direct financial interest in not finding a conflict, right? So, and at big firms too, at many of the large firms I was at, the final say in whether or not there was a conflict was the lawyer who would actually benefit from not finding a conflict. That's not a great system, right? Even if you have great lawyers who are professionals and everything, it's just different if you outsource it. And so I think it's a real value add. The pricing right now, I mean, I think makes sense for the clients. I think makes sense for us. That might be adjusted once we go live and actually see how it works out. But I wanted to have something that's like extremely affordable. And that's sort of the key with the $1,000 a month membership too. It creates a initial relationship, and then we meet every month and we talk, and it drives a lot more work, because what a client law firm, for my hourly clients, I do have some hourly clients who call me with problems, right? And we work through the problem, and then maybe that problem, they're like, oh wow, we should have a conflicts protocol in place. This problem was related to conflicts, but maybe it's not. So then it's just the next problem that they call me for. With the monthly memberships, it's much more proactive. We have great conversations. The clients are less concerned about the clock. I know my clients' kids' names. I know like what they're doing this weekend. It's just a very different relationship. I like it a lot better too, because I'm not billing every 6 minutes. I'd rather spend an hour with somebody and have a good conversation and really provide value than bill the 0.5 for a half an hour. Like, it's just so much better all around. It's very profitable, and I think really provides a great value to the client. And then it drives a lot of hourly. About half of the members have used us for hourly work or flat fee work that they otherwise probably wouldn't have, because they wouldn't have thought of, oh yeah, we should revise our partnership agreement, or can you take a look at this or that. So there's a lot. It drives a lot of business as well.
So I want to ask you about conflicts in a second, but before I get to that, I want to ask a couple things about subscription stuff. We could do a whole hour on this, probably more. Yeah. I got a lot of questions, but I'll keep it short. So first thing, for people, myself, anybody out there who's thinking about subscription, a lot of people are concerned about, well, how do I price it? How do I figure all that out? How did you do it? Was it just sort of like, hey, I'm just going to throw a dart, see what happens, and then we can work from there and iterate from there?
So, yeah, it kind of was, but I threw the dart, I picked the number, and then I battled my firm for 8 months. Like every time I would convince one partner that I should do this, like then out of the woodwork would come another guy who'd be like, whoa, no. We did flat fees once, it didn't work. Like, so I fought. And eventually I think they were just like, you know what? If you can keep your other hours up, we'll let you play around with this and you'll see that it won't work, and then you'll leave us alone. And I don't think I won anyone over. I think I just wore them down. And the pricing started at $500 a month. And it was really because I had a law firm that I was friends with, the two owners. And, I was like, hey, what could you afford, man? I need to get somebody to say yes here. And I was like, could you do 1,000? And they're like, no way. I was like, could you do 500? And they're like, yeah, okay, fine. We'll do 500. And that's where we came up with the 500. It quickly went to 6, then 8. And then it's been 1,000 now for over a year. And I think that's kind of a good spot. It's a nice, easy number.
So do you change the pricing depending on how big the firm is?
So the idea is 10 lawyers or less is 1,000. And then, yeah, if it's above that, I try to push it more towards a fractional approach. I only have 2 firms that do that. And that's like, they use us once a week. So they pay a price. It actually works out to be cheaper for them, I think. But yeah, it's not 1,000 a month. It is different if they're bigger. Both of those clients have their own general counsels too. So it's more, we're making up sort of the general counsel's office. I'm their deputy GC essentially. And then the rest of my team kind of supports them. So those are as they get bigger, it's a little different. I've had a member who had 22 lawyers, but they essentially were like, only 3 of us are going to, the 3 partners are going to work with you. If somebody else has an issue, they'll bring it to us, and then, then we'll bring it to you if needed. And I was like, look, if you want to open the door to all your people, I don't think that's a problem. My old 2 firms ago, when I launched this, they made me track time still because they were all convinced it wouldn't make any money. And I mean, it was extremely lucrative from an hourly standpoint. I bill at $800 an hour now. Back then it was, for private clients, it was like $350 or $400, I think. And it, I don't track the time anymore, but it converted to about $970 an hour. And I think it was still a huge value add to the clients, but it just, some people don't use it that month except the monthly meeting. And so you make up some time. When somebody has an issue or somebody wants to work through something, they're going to use it more. So there is a give and take, but when you get more clients, right, you get enough that aren't using it a lot that month to really make the money make sense. But I think my advice for pricing is to, throw a dart at the board, come up with something you could sell, and then let the market sort of dictate, if you're too high or too low. In my experience, attorneys very rarely overprice their service, right? We underprice our services. We never feel good about it. Even the guys billing like $2,600 an hour, I feel like they're probably actually undervaluing their time, right?
It's hard to believe.
Look, if somebody's willing to pay it, then it's reasonable. And if somebody's willing to pay it, that means somebody's probably willing to pay more. So, we should all raise our rates. But at the same time, I think if you're launching a flat fee service, like consider the first few clients. Like if you take a little bit of a wash, that's fine. Underprice it. You can always raise the price once you get a feel for it. But yeah, it's sort of, but in a lot of ways, and it's the same battle I had with my old partners, was like, we're all just making up a number, right? There's no science behind our hourly rate. We're all sort of gauging it based off of what other people do and what we think we can convince people to pay us. And, so making up a flat fee is no different. I mean, it's just, there's less to compare it to, I think. That's all.
Okay, last question on subscriptions. This is one that really I'm thinking about a lot, and it's how do you administer the program? Do you have a special technology platform? How do you work?
Yeah, so no, I don't. That's a goal, and that's a goal that my new firm will be tackling. Like I have a doc bank, and it's got templates, just basically anything anyone's ever paid me to do or I've had to do for my own firm: conflicts protocol, of counsel agreement, referral agreements, engagement agreements, turn down letters, you name it. I even have a partnership agreement. They're all extremely bare bones, right? And the idea is nothing, and I do want to plug your services, that we've used. Nothing we do is rocket science. Any lawyer can create a conflicts protocol, right? I'm as equipped as any attorney to handle the risk management stuff. What you and I bring to the table is we've done it for a lot of other lawyers. So we've got a really diverse experience base. But the templates, I think, are really valuable in that you can look at my partnership agreement template. You want to make it up yourself? Go for it. If you want to pay me to do it, I can do it. And I think the templates help because, you open it up and you're like, I don't want to, I'll pay Cunningham a little bit to do that. And, it's not a do-it-yourself job. And as I hope your audience enjoys, like, I consider myself the law firm general counsel. I created a law firm and we paid you to review our partnership agreements, right? Like, it's not do it yourself. It's what I do for clients all the time. But I always joke, like a dentist doesn't do his own dental work. If a dentist needs dental work, he goes to a dentist. Lawyers, really, we shouldn't do our own legal work. It's just not best practice. And so even though I am more than equipped to draft a partnership agreement, I was happy to pass it along. All of my partners were like, yeah, 100%, let's get him in on it. And you provided really great insight. And now it happens, you happen to be a genius, right? You happen to be one of the best lawyers I know. But it also is just a matter of like, you've seen different things than I have. And we both work in this world and probably have more experience than most in our little world of general counseling. But, we've just seen different issues come up. And there's no way to reproduce that aside from roping in a lawyer to help you out. So the doc bank, I would like to have, right now they're Word documents. People are like, they get a list or they're like, hey, do you have an of counsel agreement? And I send it to them. So I want to get that on a platform. I've had problems with payment, and I do love your payment platform through Clio. We have had trouble because my firms are all large firms, not based on individual law firms paying by credit card. So we've had problems with that in the past. Now I have a streamlined platform for payment, but it's not connected to any larger platform. It's really just our billing platform. So no, I don't have a great software solution, and that's something it's on the to-do list. It's definitely a goal to have that option, just to make it easier for clients to sign up, to pause, to access the resources. They're also calling and texting and emailing. They text and call my cell phone. It's rare that I don't actually have a physical office phone, although I have a number. So, a platform where I could streamline communications so that it's not, coming in from all different directions and it can be lost. Also, we're growing and we have a deputy general counsel starting Monday. Very excited about that. And, I have some staff now, more than I've ever had. And also I'm, in a position where I can hire more people. So I do also want to get a platform so that I'm not, answering the bat phone all the time. Obviously, there'll be instances where I need to be brought in, but the more I can spread the wealth, I think that's better for the client. They'll have the 24/7 access. They have 24/6 access right now, but that won't last forever with me. And so, yeah, getting a central software is going to be key. So if you have something in mind, let me know.
Well, no, I'm thinking through that myself because, I know a lot of lawyers. I've talked to a lot of lawyers that have subscription services, but at least the ones I've talked to, they're generally solos.
Yeah.
And it's easy when it's just you. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier because
it's doable. Yeah.
You know what's in, what's out, who's in, what's out. This is one, flow through point, whatever. But if you add a team or if you have a second lawyer or a third lawyer, maybe a paralegal, and they're coming at you through text and email and this, and how do you manage all of that? And that's something I'm thinking a lot about. And I've not yet been introduced to a solution out there, but it's something that obviously you're exploring.
Yeah. So I think there's accounting software, like client portals for accountants. And I think something like that is actually what I'll end up using because they'll have access to the documents. They can upload documents and it has the communication capabilities. But yeah, I haven't come across a good platform for lawyers, which, I think is probably just, we don't do it as much as the accountants do. But I think that'll help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a portal is going to be central to whatever you do, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it's a great sales tool, right? Because people want to explore the options before they commit to talking to me. And also, if somebody has the portal access for the general counsel membership, then maybe they see the conflicts membership and they're like, what's that? And they click and they learn more. And then, who knows? So I think it'll be a really nice way to drive sales as well.
Well, that's cool. So we've been at it for a while. I've got a few more questions. I do want to ask you this. So just for anybody out there, I think this is just it's time for you to educate just a little bit. 2 minutes or less. We got to do a 0.1 or less here. But conflict systems. I know you have the membership that you're launching and have launched, but, for people, what's a good approach? I mean, you mentioned you have a software, but, I'm sure you've seen it. You've got the old school that's just got paper. I mean, how the hell do you run a conflict check, do a paper filing platform? But then you got some that have softwares and maybe they have spreadsheets here. What, in your view, if you could just whiteboard it for a firm, let's say they have 3 lawyers. Let's just do that. 3 lawyers and a paralegal. What would you recommend the protocol be? Yeah. New client calls. Let's set it up. Yeah. New client emails one of the attorneys or calls. What do you do next?
Yeah. So I think the key is to have a redundant system. And, lawyers don't like that right away because that's double the cost, double the process. Putting aside the intake part, because I think that it's completely connected to the conflict side, but you have to have a redundant system where you can do that initial conflicts check and make sure you're not creating a conflict by talking to this prospective client. You need to make that quick and easy so that whoever is answering the phone, paralegal, receptionist, lawyer, whatever, can quickly determine whether or not there's any issue. And then have a more robust conflicts check on the back end once it turns out that this person is going to engage you. If you don't have software, Excel works, right? An Excel spreadsheet, it works. Checking your email or paper or memory, that doesn't work, right? That's not a way to do it. That's not even the way to do that initial check. And so many firms that are larger than 3 lawyers, sort of check their email. Sort of, I know my clients, like, you don't, and you certainly don't know, like 10 years ago, a client. It's not a way to do it.
Well, let me interject too real quick.
Yeah.
It's one thing to know your clients, which I'm with you. The longer you practice, you just forget all that stuff. But what if it's somebody who consulted and gave you a lot of information, but did not hire you? So they never really actually became your client.
Right. And the advantage, I think, your spreadsheet and searching your email are probably pretty comparable. But if the bar is, so, if the grievance committee comes knocking, you can't hand over your Outlook, right? But you can say, oh yeah, here's my spreadsheet. Here's where we actually, here's the email confirming that we ran the entity through our conflict system. And, here's the lawyer that did it and said, no conflict. So it really provides a more defensive conflicts check than yeah, I always just check my email. Did you check your email that time? Probably. I don't know. It was 6 years ago. So I think having it in Outlook is good. The big problem with Outlook, as opposed to a more robust system, is if you get a typo, you can't really do fuzzy search. I think you can do fuzzy searching in Outlook, but it's not as good. Fuzzy searching meaning, you could type in my name, JEF, ! And that would get Jeff, Jeffrey, whatever. You could type in J asterisk FF, and that would get Joff or Jeff or whatever, So you want capabilities that'll avoid simple admin errors like a typo, right? A good conflicts check platform would be able to get Jeff spelled with a G, right? In addition to Jeff with a J, like I spell it. So, again, there's always room for improvement, but I think starting from scratch, at least using Excel is really key. And then having a dual approach. And I think the dual approach is you have an Excel spreadsheet and someone, hopefully a lawyer, who keeps the conflict database spreadsheet, and then someone from your billing side that uses your billing as sort of the backup conflicts program. Because I find law firms are really good about keeping track of who owes them money. And while that doesn't necessarily catch the prospect who comes in the door, it should. You should still enter them into the billing platform, even if you don't bill them, right? If for no other reason than just the backup conflicts. But I think it can also be used for marketing purposes. If that guy came in the door and didn't retain you, you still want to know who he is and be able to be in touch with him, because maybe he'll have something else for you down the road. But using another database as your redundant conflict search will pay dividends. And I think tying it to your database of finances is the way to go.
And I'll say, me personally, one part of my practice is doing law firm breakups. And so it happens all the time where one of the lawyers calls me, and then within a day or two, the other one's referred to me as well. And as we grow, so I immediately, if anybody calls, it's emergency, send out an email so everybody sees it, all the lawyers, just in case they get a call from the other side. So, at least, prevent that embarrassing moment. So there's one other one, and I know we're going wild, but there's one other one that I've seen a lot, and I'm sure you have, and it's particularly at the bigger firms. You ran the conflict check at the beginning, everything passed, you're all good. You're in the middle of litigation, and then you say, all right, we got to do some third-party discovery. So you send out all these subpoenas, and then all of a sudden your partner down the hall comes in and is like, what the hell? You sent my client this subpoena. What are you doing? Right. And so, real quick, what's your approach, middle of the matter? How do you, should you conflict check before you send out your third-party subpoenas, or, what's your approach there?
100%. And yeah, subpoenas definitely, new parties, and it's a battle, right, to make lawyers remember that if parties get added, you got to run a conflicts check on them. But it is such an embarrassment, even if it's not an actual, subpoenaing a client, that's not a conflict of interest, probably. I guess it could be if it was the same matter. But it's so embarrassing, and you're going to get really great results if you're able to go to that relationship attorney and be like, hey, I need to subpoena your client. Can you call them and see what the best way to do that is? You're going to get, the client's going to be helpful. If they get the subpoena served on them, they're not going to be helpful. They're not going to be happy about it, and it's bad. So building in, that sort of intelligence is key. But again, from the marketing side of things too, if I have to subpoena a client for information, then there's some synergy there between my practice and that other person's practice that we want to explore and we don't know about. And so I think it's really important. I think your conflicts checks should be baked right into your billing and baked right into your marketing, because I think they're intertwined in a way that most law firms don't really explore.
Well, cool, man. This has been real helpful. So Jeff, we've been at it for a while, and I want to be respectful of your time. And I'm glad we finally got to do this. You've been on my list, but you finally became a founding partner, so I could invite you on, man. So man, it's been real fun. So people out there that want to find you, what's the best way?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm always on LinkedIn. You can check out our website. It's a cool website, and we have some fun stuff on there too. Fun facts. I don't really have any fun facts, but a lot of my partners and our employees are much more fun than I am. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm always on LinkedIn. But be forewarned, if you connect with me, you're going to get a lot of model rules content. So
Good stuff. So, well, thanks, man. This has been real fun. Thanks for
so
sharing
much.
some of your knowledge, man. This has been real good.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.